Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Wonderment Apps here. We're doing another product roundtable today, and the topic that we're trying to explore in today's session is how do we create really great, powerful user flows. I'm sure you've experienced this before. It's been something that as a product or tech person, you're having to figure out the pathways on a constant basis for how you guide people through whatever environment you're creating, whatever app, whatever website. Um, uh, all of the experience itself has to be given the right kind of flow and guidance for the user to get them towards the specific things they need to have happen. So today we're going to explore kind of what's the purpose of user flows. We're going to look at what are some good methodologies behind creating them, think about some of the software that might be good, and we're also going to think about how else they might be able to use in our process. So I want to reintroduce his team. If this is if you're revisiting us, then you might know us already. But let's do a quick round and introductions for the Wonderment product team, or at least part of the team. So let's go ahead and start with Amy.
I'm on mute. Good start. Hey, I'm Amy. I'm a product designer here at Wonderment Apps, and I've predominantly worked with internal tools, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. How about you, Alexandra?
My name is Alexandra. I'm a product development manager at Wonderment Apps, and yesterday was my 2-year anniversary with the company.
Yay, awesome. And then last one is Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Gillette. I'm the director of product at Wonderment Apps, and so I lead our team of designers, product developers, product managers, engineers, and we do all kinds of exciting projects together.
Very cool. All right, thanks, guys. So today we're going to dig into this awesome subject of user flows. It's one that sits at the forefront of our minds here at Wonderment Apps. We work on a lot of user flows in a lot of different scenarios. I like to think that we're kind of premier experts in the area, and we think extensively about what makes a flow a quality flow for whoever needs to engage with it. Because at the end of the day, it's really a map for people to follow for how to achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve in whatever kind of software package that they're trying to execute it in, whatever website, whatever mobile app, there's a purpose. So I think that's one of the first topics I actually want to talk a little bit about today is what is the purpose of a user flow? I think we all know that the basic purpose is to kind of show step by step how people might move through something. And I want us to explore not just what the main purpose is, but kind of what's the deeper purpose of being able to give people this kind of perspective as they're going into a technology build. So maybe Joe, we'll start with you actually.
Yeah, sounds good. So as you mentioned, user flows kind of on a basic level, they represent a user's path through the app or through the website, basically paths towards conversion, path towards, basically in any way they can navigate through this environment. It serves several different purposes. Some of them serve us as product developers directly in the sense that it starts to act as an inventory, of sorts. It starts to help you visualize what is the full scope of this thing I'm developing. If the user gets from point A to point B, how many pages, how many wireframes, how many flows does it take to get there? So it serves that purpose. It also kind of acts as a foundational piece of building test cases for QA, as you mentioned before. QA will kind of use user flows as a basis for the scenarios that they need to test when they go into testing that app or that software. It also, I think, serves a good purpose in the sense of getting sort of perspective for stakeholders and for business people, again, in regards to the full scope of what they're trying to build. Because sometimes people, see, it's really simple. The user goes, they put something in their shopping cart, they check out. But there's actually a lot of paths that the user can go between point A and point B, and to understand all those variations in the path. Because what we do in user flows is, we don't just look at the user does this, the user does that. We look at as well, we look at system actions as well. We look at, every possible variation of that flow, whether it's the golden path, the happy path, or, every offshoot of that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Alexandra, I know he just brought up like one of the topics being one of the big reasons being able to communicate with business and stakeholders. And I know there was a project that we had worked on in the past for an entertainment company that didn't have pretty much any perspective on this. And I know we spent quite a bit of time, I know one of your projects would spend quite a bit of time helping them think through some of those things. How important was the communication using that diagramming system, and kind of what did you learn through some of that process?
The user flows were critical. I mean, in my mind, user flows are primarily a communication tool. And what I like best about them is that they're such a mix of, they're a mix of technical and visuals. Like they can be such a mix of technical and visuals, and you can adjust the ratio between the tech, how much technical detail you're providing or how much visual detail you're providing, but it's the adjustment of the ratio of these details that allows you to communicate to so many different audiences, whether it's, business, as Joe brought up, QA, development, other stakeholders. Like everybody has their own perspective into what the system user is going to be doing, and user flows allows a product manager to adjust the story so that it is best heard by the audience seeing it. So at this company, I mean, user flows did everything from present the complexity of the problem to highlight all of the areas, the detailed areas that need solutions. It was an inventory, as Joe mentioned, not just of screens, but of like, have we solved this? Have we solved this? Have we solved this? Did we think about this? And I think without user flows, the project could not have been accomplished.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think like when we really got into it and we saw that this particular product had quite a number of audiences. I think they had like maybe up to 8 to 10 different core audiences using this thing. So every time that people would use the application, they would have to think about how one perspective of an audience would use it. It was a great way to kind of like bifurcate some of those flows, and it created, I mean, to me, like that purpose of being able to show what an audience perspective is using a tool set is a vital part of user flows. So I know for me, I like to always think about creating, Joe mentioned a happy path before. Happy path meaning kind of the most successful conversion path someone could take through a user flow. I like to look at that on a core audience by core audience basis before you start anything. Because another good case is like a marketplace where you might have you may have a buyer and a seller in the marketplace. They have very different paths against the same application, and their purposes are totally different in there, and communicating those to the people that represent them is important. So yeah, it's great. Thank you. Amy, maybe give us a little perspective. I know and early when you're engaging, I know one of the things that you're primarily from a design background, so you kind of jump into the wires and the designs quickly. And I know as you're growing, one of the things you're doing is really working kind of the user flow process into that. How has that changed your perspective on things for you?
I actually really like user flows a lot, because some of what Joe mentioned before is that it does give you an understanding of how many screens you have to design. And you want to make sure that you can get approval that, hey, this is what you're trying to go for. Here's a representation of your wires. Now I have to go build 6 screens. 6 screens going to take me, I don't know, say 2 weeks. So it gives an understanding of how much work I have in front of me. And it also helps when I have to go deliver those items. Sorry, that was loud. It also helps when I have to go deliver those items to development to say, okay, dev, here's the user flows that have been approved. Here's the 6 screens, and they line up directly with my 6-screen design and I hand them over to dev.
Yeah, so that actually brings up a good question. Kind of the next topic that I want us to look a little bit at is how do we best construct user flows, right? So the kind of construction process of them. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the way that you're integrating those two things. So I know if you look at the pathway, and we'll try and put up a visual of some user flow examples here. But if you look at a pathway of like a user interaction, so they're moving from one thing to another. Is it just like they go to this screen and then this screen and this? Is it that simple for you, or is there more complexity?
In one of my latest features, we're actually integrating some text enabling. So like the system does something very complicated in the background in which has to come back to the user. So it's not just user does X, Y, and Z. We have to incorporate to help dev say, you know, when the user does this, the system reacts this way to give the user back this information. So it's not just the user's doing these certain things on screens. There's a very complicated development piece that goes into that.
There's a communication. Yeah, I know one of the things we work on is we say like the user commits this action, and then the system responds with this action, right? And then the user might do this, or maybe even an outside third-party element will respond, but like actually kind of layering in the communication runs not just human to human or screen to screen, but often human to computer, and then, you know, how that kind of plays out, right?
Yeah, totally. So even in the latest feature, like I said, we have a user, a secondary user, and the system, and how they all communicate together.
Awesome, thank you. Great, Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about that when you're thinking about the communication of kind of the structure of communication of interaction? What are some of the things that you think about and guide everyone on?
Yeah, that's a great question. What my goal, you know, as mentioned before, you know, these act as a communication tool, right, between us and developers, us and QA. So my goal is to provide them with the greatest level of detail possible in terms of, you know, every variation that the system might take in response to a user's action as well, right? So depending on which path the user takes, the system might respond in different ways, or depending on a path that the user took previously, or a setting that was you know, set in another separate user flow. You know, user enters with the following setting, the system responds this way. User enters with another setting, the system's going to respond a different way. That sort of thing.
So like for you, it's the kind of like, an important part of this is like how, like within a user flow, right, you might have different kind of diagram boxes or circles or however you identify, which I actually want to talk about shape choice too, like what matters to you. But really like in the language inside like the box, when you're going from user flow to, you're really like, what I've seen is it's usually like, it's helpful to see who the main actor is, right? And then what that next action is they have to complete, right? Is
Definitely. Yeah.
why is that important?
Well, so a key like foundational thing when building any user flow is to have your actors clearly defined. I think actors is a great way to think of it, you know, and think of like a stage play. You know, what's the script, right? Thinking of it as a script, and developers think of it in a similar way. QA thinks of it in a similar way. You know, it kind of acts as the foundation for their testing scripts in a way. So you define your actors very clearly, and that helps everybody understand, okay, this one is the user, this one is the system. I tend to color code them. So the user is one color, system is another color. If there's yet another user or yet another different like role or different permissions, those will also be color coded. So it's really clear to everyone on a visual level, you know, and I tend to keep them in separate lanes as well. So we have concurrent lanes where there's the user lane, system lane, you know, user number 2, and how all of those lanes interact and how data transfers between those lanes is a really helpful thing for everybody to understand.
Awesome, thanks. And so Alexandra, I know you've built some pretty advanced flows in the past, and you've actually pioneered a lot of the visual components that we work with within the flows. What are some of the important considerations you take into mind when you're building one?
Yeah, absolutely. I love what Joe said about color coding the players, because that is a very immediate visual distinction that everybody can understand. That helps, and it's consistent to recognize those players throughout the board. Sometimes I will. So the way that I'll use lanes is I'll have a surface lane, you know, what's going on in the foreground, what actions is the user taking in the foreground, what action is the system taking in the foreground, usually, you know, this is interaction with screens. And then my second lane will be like, what's going on in the background, right? You know, what is the system doing in the background? How is the system, you know, connecting to third parties? To databases, to whatever, but like what's going on in the background that is important for the functionality of whatever it is that you're building, but our user doesn't necessarily know about. Let's see. You brought up shapes, Ryan. The two shapes that I use the most are boxes and triangles. Boxes, rectangles. So the boxes, the rectangles, those to me represent actions, actors, like those are defined entities, whether it's something that happened in the past or something that's going to happen. It's like, it's a defined, whereas triangles, those to me represent splits and paths. They're either decisions, you know, it's a question, like is the user going to go left or right? Are they going to click OK or cancel? They represent splits in the path that will then create different lanes with different responses. So, you know, if you choose the left path, then this is going to happen. If you choose the right path, then this is going to happen. And then they have their own flows built in those different directions. So those are the two shapes that I use the most. Let's see. Sometimes, as Joe said, you'll have, or as Joe mentioned, you might group things, you know, whole flows that like take place on a different color background. And then there's a whole flow here that takes place on a different color background. And they, you know, things interact because systems are complex. So I try to break as much as possible, whenever possible, I try to break flows down into like their lowest common denominator flow, into the simplest element, and then I'll have multiple simple elements, and then how they interact and relate to each other. Because whether it's comprehension, you know, human comprehension, or you know, development interaction, or QA testing, like having smaller bite-sized pieces of things is, I feel, a happier path towards completion. So yeah, sometimes I puzzle piece my flows together.
Just to be clear here too, right? There is a difference between technical schematics that tend to use very structured shape orientations to say this is a database response or this is a thing, but like these are really more about actually showing system communication. So like keeping the shapes simpler is often more easily readable by people. Even though you could potentially mix them up and add more kind of subtle information inside.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I deliberately don't do that because I'm not trying to create technical diagrams. There is a place and time for that. There's people with expertise for that. But I found, like I said, the rectangle and the triangle, those are the most streamlined and informative shapes for communication for the purposes of our user flows.
Cool. Awesome. Amy, I wanted to come back to a question kind of related to some of this stuff. Is like a lot of times the user flows include like very simple, like one-line descriptions of like, the admin user clicks the link, and the admin user expands a box and clicks a link, right? Maybe that's a simple action of what they're going to do. But sometimes you need more detail within the user flow itself. How do you show some of the expansion of detail in there, so that if you want to keep more on the page, like that there's a way to expand that?
Well, you can take your user flow a step up into a wire flow, if that's you know a good solution for how you want to.
Can you describe what that is real quick?
Yeah. So a wire flow, it would be like a user flow with a graphical representation of what your page might look like, without being fully designed in a UI kit or anything. It's just, here's a skeleton of what this page needs to do. These are the boxes that are on the page. This is the information that needs to be displayed. So you're actually capturing a more full picture of what's happening, and then the paths that continue on. So you can still say, you know, that your system is doing this in the background, but here's what your user is presented with in a more detailed fashion.
And if you need to write more text in the user flow, like what are some ways in which you might present that?
You mean in terms of annotations?
Yeah, like if you need additional annotation within there, do you put it all in the one box? Do you break it out? Like how do you handle some of that?
So I guess I would use a combination of not only user flows or wire flows, but I would combine the deliverables I would use a user flow, maybe a wire flow. I would then translate those wire flows directly into prototypes, and I would leave the annotations on the prototypes. So you can have, if you're using a full wire flow, you can definitely incorporate annotations in there. I would think that those would be more like system does X here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. That's a good rundown. Hey, so Joe, I wanted to ask you, tell me some of your favorite kind of user flow softwares that like you're into, or that you've come across over the course of time.
Sure. Yeah. Over the course of my career, I've used all kinds of tools. My current favorite is definitely Whimsical. Whimsical is super easy to use, really highly visual. The great thing about it is we can actually collaborate with people who are less familiar with UX and things like that. We can share it with a business stakeholder, and they generally understand it. It's you have all the basic shapes. You've got rectangles, circles, you've got the sort of database cylinder, you've got decision trees, all that sort of stuff, connectors. Really easy to just kind of grab those, snap them into place. It snaps everything into alignment. You can kind of connect you can connect the arrows in a single click. It's a really intuitive, really visual, super simple interface. And that's the thing I like most about it. It's also really easy to grab flows and group them. So you can kind of like just draw a box around an entire flow, and now that flow is a group, and I can move it over here, or, rearrange things as needed. It's also got, a couple of different styling options. So you can kind of distinguish between sort of some primary things, secondary things. As you mentioned, when you're looking for like a greater level of detail, oftentimes I'll have sort of an adjacent box that goes off of the main flow, and maybe it's kind of like a ghost box, just the stroke outline, and it's got some additional text there that's, maybe some important technical notes that couldn't fit into the main flow. Yeah, but Whimsical is definitely our favorite at Wonderment.
Great, awesome. Alexander, how about you? I know we obviously use Whimsical. Are there other ones that you've used that you like as well that you think are relevant?
Miro is one that's come up with my. In the past, I've used Lucid Chart. That I think is a lot more rigid and perhaps more technical. It's like as soon as Whimsical came around, I converted over to that. But let's see.
Even Sketch you can kind of play with even.
Yeah, you can play with Sketch, yeah. But I think the biggest two on my radar right now are Miro and Whimsical.
What do you like about Miro that you've experienced with it?
It seems like a really comparable tool to Whimsical. Honestly, if I had to give my preference, it would be to Whimsical, but they're very much on par. Like they've got Whimsical has, you can do mind maps, you can do decision trees, like they have the different template formats, and Miro has something similar.
Cool, awesome, thanks. Amy, do you have anything to add here? Any other ones that you want to mention?
The only other one I've used is Dry.io
Mm-hmm.
from Google. So
what do you think about that one?
It's more like Lucidchart. It's kind of rigid,
Yeah.
But it does what it needs to.
Yeah. That's draw.io, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And with Lucidchart as well, Lucidchart is a Google app as well, so it integrates in with a lot of the Google document stuff. So those are two good options for Google-based environments. But yeah, I think we primarily focus on Whimsical here because of the speed and ease of use. Had a lot of team members pick it up really, really fast. So what we've seen is you can use it for really expansive knowledge base creation that goes beyond just product as well. So a good example of that on a product level, if you're creating a product, is not only do you need the stuff for development QA, but you might also need user flows for like your customer service process, right? So like a user sends in an email about I'm having this issue, and you can actually flow out like the way that should work. Helps you make decisions on some of your choices in software. It helps you think about how you need what team members you need to have hired to be able to do things. You pre-think these things. Those teams can use these as simply and quickly as other teams. With a little bit of guidance, you can have them be impactful and create an entire environment knowledge base across the organization. It's powerful. So I mean, I think that brings up, are there other, what are some other like good uses of these flows beyond just in that product flow that you've seen or you can think of that make a big difference when working with a company? What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, as you mentioned, user flows can be used not just within a product design, product development sort of digital screen-based environment, but can actually be used on a much higher level as well. For example, at Wonderment, we use it to document all of our internal processes, as you mentioned. So, whether that's in our admin department, our sales department, it's really easy for everyone to pick up this tool and understand how it works and start to lay out some of their own processes. I've also, with one of my recent clients, I've been working really closely with the service design team. And so I've been kind of digging into more about, what exactly is service design and what role do they play? And service design is not unlike user experience design, but it's wholly different in the sense that it's not just thinking about the actions that a user takes on the screen, but the overall journey of a customer. And, a lot of our products, they have real world, applications as well. Like it's not all about being on the screen, but how does the user find themselves enrolling in our program to begin with? How does the user get to the point where they want to sign up for this software, and things like that. And so with some of our bigger clients where they've got a service design department, we're also working with them and the kind of user journeys that they map out as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great example. Awesome. Alexander, can you think of any that are applicable?
Let's see. I've even seen it used for like in managerial roles to indicate and to try to lay out a process for how somebody or a department in a managerial role is going to communicate and stay involved with their employees, whether it's a schedule of communication or or what's the purpose of each point in communication, what are the goals, what's supposed to come out of it, what's the purpose of staying engaged, who it benefits, how. I actually spent quite a bit of time trying to design a system like that for Wonderment, and used flows extensively to illustrate that the whole thought process behind that.
Yeah, that's a great one. Like you worked on conceiving an entirely new kind of like communication process between employees and managers, and thinking about a big part of what we like try and work into the company, and so like visualizing that and actually bringing in all these different departments that may not even be familiar with the stuff it's pretty powerful because they can immediately at any moment go reference it and have access to it. And it's powerful for them to come back to. And we use them actively on a daily basis, just like, hey, that's not in the flow. People can go back to the flow and go, oh yeah, I forgot to do this thing. Here it is. So you don't have to live with the total brain dump in here. Yeah.
They're also really great training tools, whether you're bringing somebody new into your company, new into your department. I mean, this is a way to document the policies and procedures of your organization and clearly lay out the way that you want things to run for anybody new coming in.
Excellent. Yeah, completely agree. Amy, anything you want to add here?
Outside of the product flow for user flows, the only other thing I'm the most familiar with is like the sprint process and how that gets set up and how that's used as a tool to communicate between product and design and what's getting delivered and when does this meeting happen. And so someone can step in and see, oh, this is the process. We need to have, this meeting tomorrow on this and what comes out of that meeting.
Yeah, I love that. We actually did a prior one of these on talking about the product sprint process a little bit and how that works. And actually a big part of that is the diagramming system of communication that goes back and forth between deliveries and feedback and the way that process works. And that's really about communication between teams really effectively. Yeah, it's great. Okay, well, awesome, guys. I mean, I think this is a great overview of how we approach user flows, what we think the benefits are, and kind of like some of the aspects of them. We hope you found it useful. Actually, Amy, can I have you go on mute real quick? We hope you found this process really useful. We hope you enjoyed some of the tips and the tricks that are in here. And obviously, if you want to learn more or you need insight and growth, let us know. We can be happy to, you can talk to any of us and dig in. We, Wonderment Apps, we create really great apps and websites and software. We do a lot of custom and bespoke work. We also work in specific platforms, but our goal is to try and help an organization find the best pathway to create the right software for what they need, whatever version that is. And as you can see, we think a lot about the processes that we go through and a lot about like how we approach solving these problems to create better efficiency, to create more effective deliveries, and to be creative. Like these things allow us to come up with like really awesome creative solutions to things. So I appreciate you guys taking all the time and offering your feedback and your insight. And we hope this was a useful video for you. Can you say goodbye, everybody?
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.